success to the efficacy of her prayer life. As you assume these seats, the tasks you face may seem at times impossible. But in spite of having suffered a stroke and with a $40,000 bounty on her head, God enabled Harriet to do the impossible. And He will do the same for us. She made 19 different trips into the dangerous South and escorted over 300 slaves to freedom, never getting caught and not even losing one of her so-called passengers. Each of you here is a conductor, and by the grace of God, you're on a trip taking people to freedom. Let the power of prayer not be the caboose, but the engine that takes you there. And these prayers that God has given us, and you have a flyer on your desk, can be your ticket. Here's my prayer for today. Lord, I pray that all under the sound of my voice come to know you more and more intimately through prayer. In Mark chapter 1, verses 35 through 38, you gave us the example of Jesus, who got up in the morning to pray, got away from distractions to pray, and from you got guidance to achieve the impossible. Help us now to learn that example for your glory and for our good. Amen and amen.
Senate will come to order. I was just waiting to catch you off guard, Mary. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Sollentrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Chair appoints the Senator from Sherman, Senator Billinger, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
Good afternoon. The Senate, having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 50. The chair recognizes the Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 50 levels the playing field between online-only and brick-and-mortar retailers. In June of 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court case South Dakota versus Wayfair was a significant decision that granted states the ability to collect sales tax for online purchases with some restrictions. The court provided a checklist of factors present in South Dakota's law that strongly suggest why it would be constitutional under this standard. Those items in the Wayfair opinion include a safe harbor, which excludes those who transact only limited business in the state. South Dakota in particular has a $100,000 in sales threshold. No retroactive collection, single state level administration of sales tax in the state, uniform definitions of products and services, a simplified sales tax rate structure, software and access to the software to be able to collect this tax, and immunity. Sellers who use the software are not liable for errors derived from relying on it. Kansas is one of 3 states to pass a law addressing this policy. Florida and Missouri are the other 2. Senate Bill 50 is based off an NCSL model language, and it is in compliance with the court's Wayfair checklist. SB 50 also deletes outdated and unnecessary click-through nexus statutes passed in 2013 by the legislature. Senate Bill 50 contains language supported by the tourism industry to address Kansas law dealing with the transient guest tax obligations for online rental services, such as Airbnb and VRBO. Senate Bill 50 also addresses the prepaid 911 wireless fee required to be collected on prepaid cell phones. The committee heard some split testimony on the issue of an effective date. Some were interested in January 1 of 2021. Other retailers were asking for July 1, 2021. The committee then made the change to April 1, 2021, which all parties appear to have agreed with. Currently, Kansas businesses selling in other states are required to comply with the other states' marketplace facilitator laws. 44 states have such laws with a minimum of $100,000 or greater. And then there are a couple others with no sales tax, 4 with no sales tax. Meanwhile, retailers from outside our state are supposed to remit sales tax on all sales in the state, but that is only because the Department of Revenue issued a notice that current Kansas law requires everyone out of state and in state to remit sales tax with no threshold in place. The Tax Foundation wrote that Kansas unveiled one of the most aggressive remote sales tax collection regimes in the country and did so without any new post-Wayfair legislation. Our Attorney General also issued an opinion in response to this notice stating that he did not believe the department has the authority to issue such a notice, but that has yet to be challenged by an out-of-state retailer, which makes it all the more important to pass Senate Bill 50. I will just close by saying that Senate Bill 50 is not a tax increase, whether you are buying diapers, which only recently became relevant to me, electronics, phones, or clothes. Those items are and should be subject to sales tax. This bill protects Kansas companies from online competitors avoiding collection of sales tax owed to the state. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Saline? Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief question. And just I want to thank the carrier of the bill for his explanation of the bill. We'll be supporting it. I did have a question about the remote sellers. He alluded to it something earlier. It sounds like right now that Kansas' expectation is that basically remote sellers need to be remitting 100%. In Senate Bill 50, I believe there is a provision in this not that addresses a de minimis for these remote sellers as well.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
That is correct. The $100,000 threshold applies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had, just for the body, I'd actually thought about introducing an amendment on this bill. My concern only with the bill at this time is that, and once again, I'm glad we're getting in this place, long overdue. I thank the Madam Chair for moving this across and getting it done, and the chamber getting behind this. My only concern with this bill is that for those remote sellers that are not participating now on a platform, that they, in fact, you could think of this, they still do have an unfair advantage over our Kansas retailers who are selling basically their goods in state here. Because when you think about it, we still have an unlevel playing field where that remote seller coming into Kansas, at least their first $100,000, they're not having to collect the sales tax, whereas our retailers right here in the state, for our local residents, they are having to obviously tax them on all their sales, period. But I will leave that discussion for another day, and I think we need to get this legislation passed. I'm glad we're moving on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Saline, would you like to respond? Okay. Other questions for the senator from Saline? Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Just want to figure out a few questions. On the telephone service, I'm guessing like, I'm going to name some different companies like Xfinity, Comcast, some Time Warner. They have different packages where they have phone service. So I'm guessing that will now have a sales tax, probably other fees that will be assessed to them programs if this passes.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
It's my understanding that the 911 fee is in relation to the prepaid wireless sales that would occur over the internet from an out-of-state retailer.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
It's my understanding then there would be no taxes over the phone service. Voice over IP, I believe is what they call it. Services that certain providers provide. Is that what I'm hearing?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
I don't see anything in here that would apply that tax to them now.
Okay.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure this bill out, and I know a lot of people have different services. They would be, phone services are built in their whole package of internet and others. And so, this could hit every Kansan in different ways. Also, on the Airbnb, is it up to anybody that stays up to 29 days will be charged a sales tax, but someone over that, is that because now you become month to month and you're a tenant? Is that correct?
Right.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Yeah, that's the transient guest tax as opposed to a sales tax, but yes, you're correct. The 29 days is the threshold.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
I'm just trying to make sure because, there's a lot of landlords across the state that would probably be worried about the bill. And I'm sure some of them Airbnbs go over 29 days too. So probably the ones that went 30 days would be exempt from the taxes, but 29 days you wouldn't.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
So 30 days on a single stay, correct.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure I understood the bill. What are some of the other aspects on the telecom piece that this bill, how it might work or be charged a tax to my constituents in the 23rd District or the people of Kansas? I'm trying to get the nuts and bolts how this is going to work online. I understand about the $100,000 exclusion, but if you've got a company that's being charged, they're probably going to hit that 100,000 real quick. And I'm just wanting to see if there's any hidden charges my consumers are going to have to pay.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to telecom, you can look at page 3 of the bill, and it does just relate to prepaid wireless service, the providers of that service in relation to the 911 fees that are imposed. So that would be directly associated with telecom providers in the sense that they are prepaid wireless sales. Other than that, I don't know that there's anything else in there specifically for telecoms.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I serve on the 911 Next Generation Committee, and they made specific allowances for a percentage of a prepaid wireless card to be contributed to our 911 services for those cards that are sold in this state. If residents from this state are buying them from out of state marketers, it only seems fair that they too should be paying that part of the 911 service fees. So I'm glad to see that as a part of this bill. I did not see any other changes to other telecommunication services. Thank you.
Senator from Saline, would you like to respond?
No, appreciate the comment.
Are there other questions for the senator from Saline? Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the senator from Saline answer, would this activity under the bill fall under interstate commerce?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
The activity under the bill being sales, yes, those sales are interstate commerce.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
I know at times the federal government has talked about implementing a national sales tax. Would this be one vehicle and a means for that to happen if all 50 states eventually adopt this?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
I don't know that that would necessarily happen, Mr. Chairman. The bill, what it does do and what the Wayfair decision does speak to is the Commerce Clause and the need to have both the feds and the state share in that decision-making authority. So as long as there is a safe harbor in it, then the Commerce Clause is satisfied in the sense that the state isn't creating an undue burden on commerce in affecting this tax collection. So that's where you get the two items that exist in South Dakota, and one of which is in this bill, which is the $100,000 minimum. As far as a national sales tax, I don't think this makes that any easier or harder for the federal government to impose.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, does the enforcement change? I mean, we currently have measures in place and we can't enforce those laws. Tell me how this improves enforcement on collection, if you could, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill allows for rules and regulations to be promulgated by the Department of Revenue, and that they have the flexibility to impose fines upon those not in compliance with the statute. This is similar to any other state's bills, which would impose fines on a Kansas business attempting to do business in their state. However, most of these are large businesses that are in compliance in other states and would just simply be adding our state to their collection. The streamlined sales tax already exists and collects millions, tens of millions in sales tax from online retailers. This would add to that those that are not currently collecting the tax.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
So you foresee, Mr. Chairman, you foresee more rules and regs, more of that type of activity?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
The bill calls for it, yes.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Is there in any way, shape, or form, any way that this bill would enhance federal regulatory action because it is involving the interstate commerce?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
My reading of the bill does not include anything that would enhance federal government control over anything.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Just one question more, Mr. Chairman. What's the fiscal note on this bill?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
One moment, please. The fiscal note for the bill shows FY 2022 expenditures of $171,000 and revenues of $35.5 million. FY 22, $171,000 approximate in expenditure and $42.4 million in revenue.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
So, Mr. Chairman, the revenue goes up as it climbs each year, out years? Is that correct, what he said?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
SGF, I'm sorry, hold on, let me go back. FY 22 SGF is 35.5, all funds is 42.4. There is a state highway fund portion that is also added to that. So then in 23, its total with the highway fund and the general fund is 49.8. So yes, there is a increase from 42.4 in 22 of all funds to 49.8 in 23, estimated in 24 of 52.7 and so on.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm going to have to ask another question. What is necessitating the increase in revenue in the out years? Are you anticipating more activity? I mean, are they anticipating more online activity and more activity from these out-of-state interests?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Having some background on just simply watching sales tax revenues in the state highway fund increase over time, I believe it is just based on increased sales activity. Reading the fiscal note, it appears that they used some calculations based on compensating use tax collections in 2020 and the out-of-state retailers that were subject to that tax and using their calculations of increases over time.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking, my colleague handed me the fiscal note, and it says on the last page of that, where it's signed by the director of the budget, it says estimates assume compensating use tax collections would grow approximately 6% each year. So they must be estimating going to be a lot more activity on the use tax, and that's out of state purchases. This has been pushed a long time by people saying this is going to help our retailers at the local level, but it appears to me based on this, it's going to help out of state interest. Can he explain?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
I'm not sure I understand. You mean that there are going to be more sales from out-of-state companies? If that's the case, then yes, nationwide, typically the economy grows, and yes, there are sales that occur out of state. That isn't to the exclusion of sales increasing in the state of Kansas at the same time. Like I mentioned previously, watching the state highway fund increases of sales tax revenue year over year, it seems roughly in line with what this is doing on a year-over-year basis.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have enough information to recognize this as appropriately is a tax hike. And while those that want to argue otherwise, the revenue and the increase in revenue clearly points to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
I'll respond in my close.
Are there other questions for the senator from Saline? Seeing none, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whether you're buying an item in-state, out-of-state, from one retailer or the other, they should all be subject to the sales tax. This bill makes sure that all online sales, instead of just some online sales, are treated the same, and that all of those are remitting a tax that is already owed. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports SB 50 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The chair recognizes the majority leader from Sedgwick, Senator Sulentrump.
made noise, but mine doesn't. You getting it? Too much noise out there.
Clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Sullentrop, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Billinger in the chair. Recommended, Senate Bill 50 be amended by the adoption of the committee report and the bill be passed as amended. HB 2026 be passed over and retain a place on the calendar.
Chair recognizes the senator from Sherman, Senator Billinger, to adopt the report.
I move we adopt the committee report.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Report's adopted. Chair recognizes the majority leader from Sedgwick, Senator Sullentrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move an emergency be declared, the rules suspended, and the following bills be advanced for final action and roll call. Senate Bill 50.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We will hold for final action. Consideration of appointments. Chair recognizes the majority leader from Sedgwick, Senator Sullentrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. In compliance with Senate Rule 55, the appointments on page 5 of the calendar are ready for consideration. Are there any questions?
Are there questions? Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Mr. President, appropriate time, I'd like to make some remarks about the Robin Marks nomination confirmation process.
Please do. And I would remind everybody, we are outside of the committee of the whole. This is the to-speak subject matter, except for the carrier of the motion. And I believe the chair of the committee so Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, you can also speak more than once. But other than that, everybody got two. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee, I stand before you today. I want to take this time to express some concerns that I personally have about the nomination process as it is pertained to Mr. Marks. The confirmation process as it pertains to Mr. Marks. I've asked the Sergeant of Arms to hand out 2 packets. I will explain in short order what those are about. But just some comments. Where I'm going with this is, number one, I am asking our leadership, both our president, vice president, majority leader, as well as our minority leader, to, if they feel appropriate, to get together and talk about the transpiration of events regarding this nomination, because I do think we want to alter or I do think there are, we need to at least have a discussion about the process going forward. Second of all, I want everybody to know that when I make my comments, these are just my own observations. They're probably biased like anybody else's, and I want the body to realize that I in no way fault anybody in this chamber. I'm not calling into question anybody's actions or integrity. I'm specifically talking about what I see as problems with the process. I believe everybody should have on your desk basically two handouts. There is a white handout, says Robin Marks confirmation packet number 1, and then a blue, light blue handout packet number 2. So just for full disclosure here, I am the ranking on Senate taxation. We had scheduled, and we did have, a confirmation hearing on Mr. Robin Marks. I believe the date was February 23rd. We had that. It was on a Tuesday. On the Sunday afternoon prior to that hearing, we received the contents basically from Mr. Eric Stafford, lobbyist for Kansas Chamber of Commerce. That is the white packet that you have before you. And so, anyway, this packet was submitted to the committee members on the Sunday before the Tuesday hearing. You can see, and this is printed on both sides, but you see the email from Mr. Stafford to the committee. And basically, just to summarize briefly, Mr. President, he's basically alleging that Mr. Marks has conflicts of interest, as well as he's making reference to statute talking about rules of judicial conduct. And he is basically trying to make the case that Mr. Marks' nomination is running afoul on various grounds, both of the statutes and supposed conflicts of interest. You'll proceed to see in that packet, basically, from my understanding, what he gave us. This was the exact same materials he gave to the Senate nomination process, Mr. President. And so you see a letter dated last year to Senate Majority Leader Jim Denning. Once again, Mr. Stafford outlines his comments about his concerns upon the appointment of Mr. Robin Marks. He cites, once again, the Kansas Board of Tax Appeals statutes talking about high bars and ethical standards, which is implying, I assume, that Mr. Marks does not meet those. He also goes on to allege that Mr. Marks has both a client conflict and an issue conflict. In his cover letter to, at that time, Senate Majority Leader Denning. You will see then on the back of that page, keep going through the handout, there's a reference to the Kansas statutes annotated, which I believe he talks about. Then you will see, as referenced in his cover letter to Senator Denning, you will see then basically, he talks about basically how the president of the Appraisal Institute wrote a letter to the president of the IAAO, basically where this president of the Appraisal Institute is saying that the supposed IAAO position paper is conceptually flawed. And then he also includes a letter from the Appraisal Institute to Ms. Amy Rasmussen, who is the president of the IAAO, and he goes to great lengths talking about why this simple fee paper by the IAAO is supposedly has such technical problems, as it were. He also includes in the packet, Mr. President, a letter from a Mr. David Linhoff. Basically, it looks as if a woman, you can read the letter there, by the name of Linda Terrell, has basically, Ms. Terrell has at her request, Mr. Linhoff is providing some sort of analysis of the testimony of Mr. Robin Marks. I presume that's was some sort of case that Mr. Marks was an expert witness on. You'll go on then to find the curriculum vitae of Mr. Mr. Linhoff, which would appear to be the resume of a well-traveled expert witness. Then you have a second packet before you, and this is basically information that I have compiled as I have done research on ascertaining whether I believe, well, first of all, not really ascertaining much about Mr. Marks per se, Mr. President, but really more talking about basically trying to get to the bottom of Mr. Stafford's assertions regarding the purported conflicts of Mr. Marks and his ability to maintain the ethics standards by statute he cites. So basically, the way this went, Mr. President, is that when Chairwoman Tyson then conducted the hearing on Tuesday, obviously she allowed us to ask questions of both Mr. Marks, the nominee, and she also allowed us to ask questions of the other folks. I requested specifically ask comments of Mr. Stafford. The first question, and this is as I go through this, I'll now be referring to this blue document. The first question I asked Mr. Stafford was in fact if the chamber had any clients who had cases before BOTA. And he indicated that he did. Then I specifically asked Mr. Stafford if in fact that was not, Mr. Stafford was in fact in conflict. Did he have a conflict? And the fact that he did not disclose that to the tax committee. He claimed at that time, in that abbreviated discussion we had, because we had other things on the agenda and the chairwoman had to cut basically the hearing short because we had other items on the agenda unrelated to the nomination. But basically he gave what I would, just an example supposedly of what a true conflict of interest was. And then basically the hearing came to an end. I did not have the time to complete questioning, basically asking Mr. Stafford about the other allegations in the pack of information. And we had a reopening of the hearing, had final opportunities to ask Mr. Marks questions, and then that was it, just because the brevity of the schedule and the things on the calendar. But I wanted to share basically information to the committee of the whole, because I really feel, Mr. President, that we have a situation of where not once, but now twice, the confirmation process of Mr. Marks has been compromised. I've heard from a number of people in this body, it's like, oh, that's a controversial nominee. Well, I would offer, Mr. President, that he's a compromised nominee. Because from what I can tell, and if somebody wants to jump up and correct me, I think when Mr. Stafford launched his original packet to, at that time, Chair Denning of the Senate Confirmation Oversight Committee, my impression is the committee really did nothing with that. And I think they just sat on the nomination until at some point he decided he didn't want to handle it, and he got kicked over to tax. Now that is my assumption as I go forward in this. If somebody wants to correct me that these issues have in fact been addressed before, then I stand so corrected. But that's the assumption as I go forward on this. But my point today, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, is that basically we, the committee, the Senate Tax, did not have the opportunity to ask Mr. Stafford his specific allegations about Mr. Marks. And as I already shared with the body, Mr. Stafford did offer, in fact, that yes, his client members had open cases before BOTA. I consider that a huge conflict of interest that Mr. Stafford would put this pack of information of a presidential light against Mr. Marks and not reveal that he had that conflict himself. I think that's a problem. Going forward, though, I want to point out some other, I guess, problems I have with the information that Mr. Stafford presented that weren't able to be addressed by the committee. You will see in the packet I put together in the blue packet, on the back of the first page, you will see a letter from Mr. Marks to Chairman Denning at the time, specifically addressing the allegations that Mr. Stafford made to Chairman Denning. And he goes in here to say, quote, I am a member of the Appraisal Institute, the world's leading organization of professional real estate appraisers. He holds their designations. He says, I'm the first real estate appraiser in Kansas to successfully complete the Appraisal Institute's litigation professional development program. He goes on to state, I strongly dispute the statements made in the Chamber's letter that Mr. Marks advocated in support of the IAAO position on the redefining the fee simple contrary to Kansas law. And you can read the rest of that letter there. And then he goes on to basically say, oh, by the way, Mr. Stafford, in his letter to the group, he says that, yeah, I represented, the county's interest. Mr. Marks also goes out to point that he represented the owners of the big box retailers. So Mr. Marks, his professional history, he's worked both sides of the fence, as it were, on this issue, both the county and the owners of these big box retailers. So he also, then you'll see Mr. Marks basically pledges he will follow the Kansas Code of Judicial Ethical Conduct. So what he is saying in essence is like, look, if I feel I'm in conflict, if a case comes up that I was part of earlier, obviously I'll follow the normal protocols by ethical standards, and I'll take myself off the case if I think that's an issue. There's been a lot of, I don't know, for Mr. Stafford, he in his letters, and the letters you'll see in that packet, the white packet, this is where, going back to the Appraisal Institute, you'll see this letter from, it's several pages long, Mr. Sherman from Chicago basically sends a letter to Ms. Rasmussen, who's the president of the IAAO. And I just want people to understand, I actually put in here, what is the IAAO? It's basically a nonprofit, basically education research organization for bureaucrats to figure how to appraise property. I mean, that's the simplest way I can put it. And they're right across the state line over in Kansas City, Missouri. They have members from around the world. That's who they are. That's what they do. And so I just put a page there so you can read about who they are, because you will find in a lot of these people involved with the appraisal process, they use the IAAO educational references. You make no mistake, they are a worldwide leader in appraisal methods, and people, the government bureaucrats, refer on them. They rely on them to follow USPAP standards. So the real fly in the ointment, and this is what I was getting to basically, we had a little bit of debate last week on Senate Bill 72. The IAAO came out with something called Setting the Record Straight on Fee Simple. And this is what has been the subject of ire from Mr. Stafford, the Chamber of Commerce, particularly their clients and their attorneys. This is where I get to my letter here. You will see in this lengthy tome written from the Appraisal Institute, where they supposedly lay into the deficiencies with this paper that I've just referred to. And by the way, it is kind of a fun read. It's only like 8 pages long, but it's kind of fun if you're kind of a policy nerd. It's kind of interesting to review. But the point being is that the date on this letter of where the Appraisal Institute is supposed to take an exception with this thing, note the date on that, March 31st, 2020. And then you will see back the letter. Once again, Mr. Stafford did not present this to the committee, but actually the president of the IAAO promptly responded back to Mr. Sherman of the Appraisal Institute on May 4th, 20, saying, Dear Mr. Sherman, we got your letter on March 31, 2020, responding to the white paper. As you know, the deadline to submit written testimony in this paper was June 14th, 2019. So basically, the Appraisal Institute, and by the way, many of their members are members of IAAO. I mean, it's a very incestuous industry, okay? I mean, they cross-pollinate all over the place, okay? So Ms. Rasmussen is telling Sherman here that, hey, you're basically several months late, because they actually put out a call to all their industry members asking for input on this fee simple paper that supposedly drew much ire. And of course, at the time, Appraisal Institute had no comments, but until several months afterwards, when I guess some of their members were actually making money off of the dark store theory, they decided they want to go on the record and express a position at that time. But just the point being is that, my point is when I look at the date on this too, the end of March, this was right before that Mr. Marks's nomination was basically put in before the committee. So I can't help but think that, and once again, I'm not going to cast aspersions, but I find the timing of this rather coincidental that this letter is going to the IAAO as the Marks nomination is going before, Chairman Denning. So basically, you will see here in the response from Ms. Rasmussen, basically says, hey, thanks for your feedback, but we fully stand by your paper, our paper as it stands. And she goes on to say, given the high level of education, knowledge, experience of the attendees, which also included many AI or Appraisal Institute members, we regret that you guys have elected to ignore the recommendation. So basically, a lot of the AI membership bought into that paper. So the reason I want to paint that is basically in Mr. Stafford's submission of information to the committee, he's trying to make it sound like, oh, this rogue group, IAAO, and their rogue, fee simple paper, which is somehow out of the norms of industry. Okay, it's biased. I want to go on then to look at basically the next interesting thing, and the kind of the final chunk we got in the packet was, you see this letter from, once again, David Linhoff, and he's addressing it to Ms. Linda Terrell. And I did ask Mr. Stafford about this specifically. I said, well, isn't Ms. Terrell one of the attorneys for your big box clients? And he indicated that she was. So here we have, I just want to paint the picture for you. Here we have the attorney for basically the chamber members' big box. Okay, the attorney has reached out to this guy to say, hey, write me something, give me some feedback on Mr. Marks. Well, if, once again, if Mr. Linhoff had never worked with Ms. Terrell prior to that, okay, where it truly was an independent relationship and was an unbiased assessment, I could understand that. Then I want to basically turn the firm back to, the group back to the paper, the blue paper. So you will see after the IAAO setting the record straight, you'll see the response from Ms. Rasmussen back to the AI, the Appraisal Institute. I just went to the website of the Altus Group, and it talks about how this is a firm that effectively manages your assets' largest operating expense, real property tax. And he goes on to say that, and this is once again Mr. Linhoff's firm, we're going to improve your bottom line with savings on your real property tax. Okay? So his job, it basically is to minimize, obviously, the tax obligation of his clients. And lo and behold, I got this right off, obviously, the internet with Johnson County. Go back to 2018. Here's an article of Super Target. Once again, is one of the chamber's clients. Here's Linda Terrell, the attorney. And there is reference to Mr. David Linhoff. Okay. All three making comments in support of the target position. So once again, to me, yet another conflict. Point being, body, is that when I look at the comments from the Appraisal Institute, Mr. Linhoff's comments, they just don't hold water. Those organizations themselves are massively conflicted, particularly Mr. Linhoff, because obviously he has had some sort of, I would guess, some professional relationship with her, particularly represented this Super Target case we should read in that Kansas City Journal article, Kansas City Star article. If you keep going, this was really funny. Well, funny, kind of I'm sorry, a cynical term. So after I'd asked Mr. Stafford to talk about when he protested that he was not in conflict, and he offered me an example of a situation where there was a conflict, he described this situation of some female attorney and some situation that arose and why it was a conflict. And I really wasn't paying attention to him because I was trying to organize my notes and keep my train of thought of what I was going to ask him next. The very next day when we had, after that abbreviated hearing, I actually got an email, actually got a call from a gentleman, and this person, Mr. Tony Mativi, said, hey, I know that woman that Mr. Stafford was talking about. And he totally misrepresented the situation. So once again, we have a lobbyist that's presenting information that is questionable. I've also included some additional information here because we have the situation of the nomination process itself, of which I have concerns. But I also don't want to get away too much far from the fact of the pocketbook and wallet implications of what this means to your residential homeowners. I have included the next portion, so in the blue packet here, I know it's kind of all running together here, but after the Mativi letter, I've got basically something from the Board of Tax Appeals. This is a determination about Dayton-Hudson Corporation in Johnson County. And I bring this to you because I want you to see basically the amount of money we are talking about that's being argued over. So on this page, the Johnson County page, the summary decision, if you turn the page over, you will see 8 big box, I think it's 7 big box properties. And you go down that list and you'll see the county's appraised value. 21 million, 21 million, 21 million, 11 million, 16 million, 14 million, 15 million. And here's the taxpayers' proposed valuation. 7 million, 5 million, 5 million, 5 million, 5 million. The deltas between those numbers literally can be $10 million or more. And here you have 7 parcels of property that could be anywhere $50, $60, $70 million in a delta swing between what the county says the property's worth and what the big box store owner is worth. The reason why I bring this up, Mr. President, is because I am not here to argue whether the dark store theory as proposed by, these attorneys for these big box stores, whether that is relevant or not. I'm not a appraiser, I don't practice law, it's not my gig. And make no mistake, our big box customers, they need to have their say in court. But what I am concerned about is that I want everybody to realize that, when this dark store theory, okay, if this is where we're going on the appraisal of these big box stores, that tax burden is going to radically shift to your residential homeowners. And when you look at places like, Johnson County, Douglas County, Wyandotte, where you basically have a residential property tax base of maybe 75, 80%, they're going to bear the brunt of that. But I would also say, Mr. President, to my rural senator friends, you will bear the brunt of that as well too, because quite honestly, if you don't have much of a tax base and that big box goes out, okay, you're going to feel it just as much. I've also included in the packet, just for your review, basically there was another thing. This is before Wyandotte County. You'll see basically a summary conclusion where basically the court, the voter decided in favor of an assessment that Mr. Marks had done, what he had done. And then finally, I also include just, once again, special task force tackles the dark store issue. This issue has been around a while, okay? It just didn't pop up magically with this fee simple paper that was published in 2019. This IAAO, once again based in Kansas City. Okay, and by the way, there are actually Johnson County, I don't know if he's appraiser or assessor, but Paul Welcome, he's one of the board members on IAAO. Okay, but they've been talking about this issue for some time. So, Mr. President, with that, I will basically wrap up, but just some final closing comments. I appreciate the body's concern, but once again, my concern with this nomination, this process, is that basically Mr. Stafford has done this now twice, where he has basically done a document dump on a committee. I'm not sure that in either instance, I know in the tax we didn't have the chance to fully vet that. I'm not sure it ever got addressed at all when Chairman Denning had this. And I'm really concerned about the precedent this sets, because if we're gonna have a nomination process, and I've been around the block to know that basically, nominations, and obviously they can be the nominations themselves, they can be controversial. And you can get, communications from your next door neighbor, citizens across the state, and you will take that information, you evaluate it for what it's worth. And for that type of informal communications, I'm not advocating at all that you have to have people come before you and testify or whatever. But what I am advocating is when you have basically a registered lobbyist, particularly with a group as big as the State Chamber of Commerce, I think it is imperative that they are going to present information, their viewpoint on a nominee. I think it needs to be just as formal as the nominee's curriculum vitae that gets submitted for the committee itself. I think they need to officially come before the committee. I think the committee needs to have an opportunity to ask all the questions about that information has been presented to reveal the conflicts of interest. So once again, I'm concerned about our nomination process. I do believe Mr. Marks' nomination has now been compromised twice. I will also share, Mr. President, I do believe we have some potentially bigger issues here. I'm really wondering about the independence of the BOTA itself now. Because I can't figure out if, with Mr. Marks, from the information I've seen, he seems to be probably, from what I gather, the most experienced of these guys out there. There was no information presented where he was actually officially disciplined or cited for professional misconduct or anything. I mean, if there was, I'm happy to consider that. But it really makes, I feel, for our committee to offer a recommendation when I look at the record, and the only record outside of the gentleman's resume is something that is obviously biased and conflicted and has not been challenged thoroughly. So I will leave it at that, Mr. President. At the appropriate time, what I would like to recommend the body is that we re-refer the Marks nomination to the Judiciary Committee. And the reason why I say it is I will go back to Mr. Stafford's original complaint about him citing concern about basically Mr. Marks having some sort of maybe being able to meet the Supreme Court rules of judicial conduct applicable to all judges of the district court. That was his lead challenge on his grievance with the Marks nominee. I do not believe, Mr. President, the Taxation Committee has the judicial background or the legal apropos to figure out if Mr. Stafford's accusation or challenge is in fact legitimate. It may be, I don't know. But the appropriate time, Mr. President, I would like to make that motion that we refer the Marks nominee to judiciary. I appreciate the body's patience with me. Thank you.
So we generally treat confirmation nominations like bills, so I believe that motion is in order. Does anybody wish to speak to that? Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I would like to speak to that. The Senate Tax Committee did vet this nomination, and regardless of the concerns raised by the good senator from Douglas County, the committee did hear from Mr. Stafford. He was allowed to speak and to address the committee. And regardless of those issues, there were concerns brought up on Mr. Marks and his background. And I would ask that the body reject the motion to refer this to the Judicial Committee. We have fully vetted it. It's time to vote. And I will give you some information as to this nominee. In fact, he testified in front of the Senate Tax Committee March 6, 2018. In his own words, he talks about the white paper, not written in 2019, but that was released in December 21st, 2017 with the IAAO. And if you continue that timeline that was started from the senator from Douglas, in March of 2020, the Appraisal Institute, through its president, Mr. Sherman, wrote to the IAAO rejecting their position on the dark store theory. So I would bring to the body's attention his own testimony. I would also point out the fact that this nominee was presented to the Oversight Committee off session and was pulled at the last minute. I would also point out to the body that Mr. Marks has done work for Johnson County, Wyandotte County, and it's my understanding will be working for Shawnee County. Over 70% of the BOTA cases come through these counties. Some may think that's not a conflict of interest when you have actually worked for the county itself. However, I have grave concern over that. Again, Mr. President, I would ask that the body reject this motion to refer it back to the Judiciary Committee. Thank you.
On the Holland motion, Senator from Miami, Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am in opposition of the Holland motion, and I will explain why. While he spoke to us, he made mention if we're going to have a nomination process, and it should be fair, it should be appropriate. We have a nomination process. We also have a confirmation process. And let me just say, I do agree with him that the process has been tainted, but in my opinion, the taint has occurred from the Office of the Governor, specifically the Director of Appointments. We did have a hearing with regard to the nominee, and then afterward, in fact, it was the day that we as a committee were to discuss action on that nominee. All of the members of the Tax Committee received an email from Scott Allegrucci, Director of Appointments. And in part it said, and a former colleague of Mr. Marks and former member of the Kansas Real Estate Appraisers Board, retired appraiser Jack Shelton, sent an email to Senator Baumgartner yesterday regarding the appointment of Mr. Marks to the BOTA. It seems like I realize I'm pretty old school, but when email is sent directly to me, to my Senate email account, to my private email account by a constituent, that would be a Jack Shelton who I'd never met before. I was the recipient of that email, and I should have control as to where else that email might go. So it was very interesting to me, as I hadn't read Mr. Shelton's email, I went back and double-checked, and it was just sent to me. So how is it that the Director of Appointments, who is the one responsible for that nomination process, would have an email to share with all of the committee members. Actually, nothing too nefarious, but it is a taint in the process. I do want the body to know that I responded to Mr. Allegrucci. And my email said, let me start by saying, I find your email and attachment to be inappropriate and offensive on many levels. While I received a letter via email from Mr. Shelton, it was addressed to me and only me. You were not CC'd on the correspondence, nor was anyone else. I never contacted you or your office about the receipt of this letter. It is interesting that in just that, by golly, we got to get this through the confirmation process, that the appointment or the nomination secretary would feel, or the director of appointments would feel that he needed to forward an email that was received by only me. I view this as a breach of professionalism as his role. I've never received apology. I've never been contacted by the office, but we deserve better from the office of the governor and from the director of appointments. I do believe Mr. Allegrucci's approach is unprofessional and it should not be tolerated. So I was the one that made the motion in committee that we pass out without recommendation, and I would like the body to know that it was the senator from Douglas that seconded that motion. And that was the vote, and I believe it was unanimous. This has been a tainted process, but it's not just at the feet of a lobbyist. The governor's office has been a part of that taint. So we can send it to another committee. It still doesn't change the fact that this has been a very inappropriate and unprofessional process coming out of the governor's office. So I urge the body to vote against moving this to another committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, along with a lot of others in this body, have been having a lot of experience sending and receiving emails, some which are carbon copied and some which are blind carbon copied. So it has been hard for me to know who else received that email. I also have sent out some emails that I wanted other people to know and blind carbon copied, and I'm not sure that those people know that they were blind carbon copied. So this seems, what's been brought up seems like a question that should be addressed, but I don't think we know enough right now to know if that is taint or if someone actually received a copy of that email. I'm standing up to support this motion because I found the information compelling about Mr. Marks, that he had represented some of the big box stores in addition to the counties. I think there is a legitimate question about whether or not he has a conflict of interest. I think the Judiciary Committee would be appropriate to decide that. So I stand in support of this motion.
Senator from Miami, Senator Baumgardner. I would remind that we're taking up questions outside of Committee of the Whole, so this is the second time.
I appreciate that, Mr. President. We do know who was blind copied. A commissioner, an elected commissioner on the Johnson County Commission is who was blind copied. No one else. And that has been verified by the original sender. The original sender sent it to me and blind copied a Johnson County commissioner. How it fell into the hands of the director of appointments, we can all take a guess. That's not what's at issue. A letter that was not sent to the Director of Appointments was shared by the Director of Appointments to others. He knew good and well it wasn't sent to him by me, and it wasn't sent to him by the original sender of the email. That is what is inappropriate, and that is what has tainted this process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Solentrop, since you're the carrier of the appointments, do you wish to make comment on the motion of Senator Holland?
Mr. President, I think at this point, I'm going to refrain from any additional discussion. I think it's been clearly explained by Senator Holland, his position, and this nominee has been clearly vetted enough in tax that I'm going to leave it to the will of the body, the Republican caucus, and perhaps make a remark upon an explanation of vote.
Very good. With no one else standing, Senator Holland, do you wish to make final comment, or we'll cast your motion?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to follow up to a number of comments. First of all, no, the committee did not have the full opportunity to address the allegations made in the materials that were sent from Mr. Stafford to the committee. Number two, if there was other materials out there, as the chairman was suggesting back in some sort of a letter in 2018, that she felt was determinable, and as far as ascertain the nominee's qualifications, fitness to serve, I just wish she was served with the committee. But where I stand today, right now with this nomination, is that we have a lobbyist from the state chamber whose members have opened cases before BOTA, okay, and they're casting aspersions on the professional integrity of a person who might end up on that court judging their cases. And why is that? Is it truly an integrity and a professionalism issue? Or is it truly because they're afraid the guy might actually rule against them once in a while? So if we're going to go forward and just have the State Chamber of Commerce, okay, pick our nominees, fine. I would humbly request, though, that our leadership get together, both sides, and talk about to what extent this process needs to be addressed so this doesn't happen in the future. With that, I move my motion, Mr. President.
You've heard the motion of Senator Holland to re-refer the nomination of Karl Marx back to Robin Marx. That truly was a Freudian slip. I apologize to Mr. Marx. So, on the motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion fails. Back on the appointment. Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to comment to that. The Chamber of Commerce comments were written only. I think that committee members would have thumbed through them. I'm not sure how close they would have studied them, but I think that the ranking senator, it was a thorn in his side, and so therefore I allowed the chamber to come up and address the committee and answer his questions and concerns. And they were exposed, absolutely exposed to the light of day. It was completely transparent. The majority of the committee members were more focused on his experience, and that's where a majority of the questions lied. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further question or comments for the Senator from Sedgwick? Seeing none, we will hold for final action. Motions to concur. Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson on SB 13.
Thank you, Mr. President. Quickly, I will go
Senator
over
from Lynn,
Senate.
I apologize, I jumped ahead. I need a motion
you.
on the appointment. Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, before I make that motion, it's not necessarily for or against either or both. It is simply the motion to put the process in play. So I move the appointments.
You've heard the motion, and that will be held for final action. Back to the senator from Lynn on a motion to concur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 13, this body passed it out earlier this year in January. We sent it to the House. The House did amend it, and they amended it across the floor. The original bill had 4 major sections to it. The first was it would repeal the tax lid, the current tax lid that is in statute. The second major portion is the transparency portion. It would require local governments to have a revenue neutral rate calculated. So as your valuations increase on your property, we've all seen this, that the valuations increase and you'll go and your local governments will say, well, I didn't raise your taxes because the mill levy may even go down. But we all know we're writing a bigger check. So what this bill would do, the transparency portion, is the local government, if they want to bring in a dime more, a penny more than the previous year, they would have to send out a notice to each of the taxpayers in that taxing district. And on that notice, it would have the amount that your taxes were estimated to go up, their revenue neutral rate increase, and a date and a time that you would have a meeting and for open comments and for the body to vote on that increase or not. The other portion of the bill was the maintenance, normal maintenance on your home, that it would not increase the valuation of your property. And a final was the option, the county treasurers to set up an option plan for your property taxes. The House, as I said, did make some changes. What we sent to the Senate did not include K through 12. They were included on the report, but they were excluded from the meeting, the notice, and the voting requirement. However, the Committee of the Whole in the House deemed it necessary to put K through 12 in. And they also removed any other exemptions. So there are no exemptions. In committee, they put a $1,000 threshold on valuations would be exempt. The Committee of the Whole removed that. So every property taxing authority, except for the state that collects the 1.5 mil for universities and other buildings, would be included in this legislation. It sounds like the final train is leaving the station on this motion to concur, but it's not. Senate Bill 277 has a hearing next week, and that is the 20 mil that would be levied for schools. It's what we pass every other year. And so we will have this discussion whether the 20 mil should be included in this transparency bill or not, and the other school property taxes such as LOB and capital outlay. So we will look at that in further detail. In the meantime, I think that the House has done good work. I know that the Senate has done good work. I would like to take a minute to give you a little bit of a history of how this came about, and I apologize if I get emotional on this. Many people had talked to me about property taxes and an issue, what it is for the state of Kansas. And there were many down in Pittsburgh, others across the state that, this was on my radar. I was studying it in a big way. But I got a phone call in 2019 from Senator Bud Estes. He was wonderful. We all know it. We miss him greatly. But Senator Estes called me. He said, I've got 2 brothers. They're very upset about their property taxes. I know you can do something, Karen. I was proud to get that call, and it kicked off an operation. It kicked off a process. The former vice chairman of tax, the current chairman of tax, myself, Senator Estes, and many people throughout the state engaged in this process to try to find how can we fix property taxes in Kansas. We are literally taxing people out of their homes. You guys have heard, we did a list, a weighted matrix. This came to the top of the list. So there's many people that have had in their hands many words to describe this legislation. The majority leader used the word historic. So each one of us in this chamber will have a chance today to decide whether we want to be a major part of fixing the property tax problems in Kansas or being a part of the problem. I ask that you join us and concur on this motion and be a part of the solution. I would yield to the ranking. I think he would like to speak on this.
Before you yield, Senator, I need a motion.
Do I? I thought I was supposed to describe it and then the motion.
Yeah, we need the motion in case there's a subsequent substitute.
Okay. Excuse me. I move that the Senate concur to House amendments on Senate Bill 13.
Very well, and you've now yielded. Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Chairman from Lynn yielding to me. I rise in support of the motion to concur. It has been a long journey for the Chairwoman Tax Committee, but she has put an inordinate amount of work into this. I believe it has been a strong bipartisan effort. In the tax committee, I mean, the committee has looked at a number of property tax issues. I do believe this goes a significant way in providing transparency to the process. I will tell you as well, I'm very supportive of the bill because to me, getting rid of the lid to me is a twofer. Number one, by getting rid of the lid, basically that was truly hamstringing our communities that are growing. And make no mistake, this bill providing transparency, those communities, when they are growing, if they need additional revenues, they will raise taxes. But at least your taxpayers will be notified what is going on. I also like the removal of the lid and, in essence, basically the removal of the COLA. Because if you really think about it, we had a subsidy in the lid. And the COLA was basically a cost of living to all of our communities. They could build that into their budget every year. And let's face it, we have a lot of communities out there that are dying. And so I view this from the perspective as well as is that it's really holding all our Kansas communities accountable. I mean, we're going back to the dollar. If it's $1 more, you send out a notice. I was pleased with the changes that, let me back up a second. When we send this over to the House, you will recall that Chairwoman Tyson made accommodations to basically put an amendment on from basically League of Municipalities. That was one of the issues that got the bill last time and why the governor vetoed it. She graciously accommodated those into the bill. That's the reason why I'm supporting this once again. She's really worked across to all stakeholders to try to find a way to move this thing forward. I was really concerned about the initial actions of the House Tax Committee themselves. They actually started excluding certain groups. I felt that was really going against the spirit of the bill. Then when it came to the the House floor, basically I believe the chairman basically kind of did it about face and threw everything back in, which was good with the exception of the school districts. One of the things that I appreciated Chairwoman Tyson doing when we were working this on the Senate side is she made accommodations to keep the school districts out of this. I personally believe that particularly when you look at the 20 mil school finance levy, and when you look at LOB, they really have nothing at all to do with the mechanism of SB 13. Because when you think about SB 13, keep in mind, SB 13, Mr. President, is basically a mechanism for these local units of government to basically not get out of control with their budgets. Because if they have a budget that is requiring an increase in total tax dollars, if it's $1 over, they got to send out a notification. Keep in mind your school districts, okay, their big budgets are your school district general fund and your LOB. They don't control that. Okay, that's what we figured out here with the court cases and everything. That's on the school finance formula. All right, so make no mistake, the locals have no control over that 20 mil school finance levy. My personal opinion is, and as the chairwoman alluded to, we have another bill coming along, and I will strongly advocate for removing the 20 mil school finance levy completely out of the SB 13 scheme. Because we don't need 300 school districts sending out a notice to their patrons saying, hey, the 20 mil in our district went up $1. It's going to happen every time. It's just going to sow confusion. The other thing that I'm also going to lobby for strenuously, I'm not speaking on anybody else's behalf, is I do want to remove the LOB out of this as well too. Because while the school district does, you know, they grab those local property taxes from the LOB, keep in mind, the LOB once again is a percentage driven off of the school finance formula. 33%, 31%, 15%, wherever you're at. They're not directly controlling that. The other portions of the school finance, be it the capital outlay, the bonding, whatever it is, I'm really less concerned about that. Make no mistake, there are some significant budget issues, though, when you look at the overall school budget. And so I think if we address particularly 20 mil levy and the LOB, I think we'll have just a home run on this bill. So I want to commend Chairwoman from Lynn. I think she's done great work. I think she worked in a very bipartisan manner with the committee. I think we've got a good product, and I pledge to this body that I will strongly work to yank both the 20 mil and the LOB in that trailer bill to, in my mind, make this thing complete. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yield falls back to Senator from Lynn for further comment, but then we need to open for questions. Senator from Lynn.
You may open it for question. Thank you.
Further questions, Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question. I do appreciate that you've said you would have a hearing next week in Senate Tax. My question just is, you know, we all want transparency. I go back to my explanation of vote on Senate Bill 13, and I voted for it because, you know, I think all of us believe in government transparency is what we want to support. I raised some questions from constituents, and I said, I hope that as we send this to the House, we get a better product. I appreciate the work that the chair of tax has done compromising. I know my mayor has been a part of a lot of those conversations and trying to do this, but I felt like the compromise was that the schools were not included. And just some concerns that I have, you know, the revenue neutral, that June 15th date, our school districts don't even have their KSDE budget worksheets to calculate by then. So just logistically, I have concerns with how we do this. To meet those deadlines for their budget worksheets, they would have to have those available in mid-May to meet that July 15th deadline. And that's not going to allow them to address any adjustments that we make in the legislature. The public hearing aspect, no earlier than August 10th and no later than September 10th. District budgets are due to the county clerk by August 25th. So we want to engage the public, but there is not enough time. You know, this really limits the opportunity for our school districts to engage with the public. So I will not be supporting this. I appreciate that we've said we will fix this in a trailer bill. Call me a skeptic and a little cautious. I want the best bill as we put forward. I mean, we can only look to the Brownback tax cut bill, and there was an agreement to have a trailer bill, and that didn't happen. So I will not be supporting this. I supported the underlying bill, but I believe when the House put in this amendment, putting in the school districts, they really took the compromise out. So with that, thank you.
Further questions for the Senator from Lynn? Seeing none, Senator from Lynn. Actually, you want to closing remarks?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. President. I appreciate the comments of the ranking leader. I will have a hearing. I had said that I would. I think that we need to fully vet that and make sure that we don't have a ripple effect or unintended consequences. So that hearing is scheduled for next Thursday on Senate Bill 277. I'm sure we'll have quite a few conferees, and we will work through the process and give it as much time and diligence as it needs to get a good product. You know, a majority of comments that we heard were that schools were excluded and they wanted them to be in. And the House sent us a very loud message of 120 to 3 votes with schools being in this legislation. We got to this point last year and the governor chose to not support the legislation. It is my hope that she will not veto the bill this year. There are changes that I think make the bill better, and it is a transparency bill. Again, I want to thank the vice chair, the previous vice chair. I know I can't call him out by name, but you know the good senator from Sedgwick, vice chair, and the good senator from Cawley, who's the current vice chair, and Representative Highland, Representative Corbett, and others. We gave our own time. We were not paid. We were not on the state's dime. We traveled and worked very diligently on this. And I want to thank all you guys for your work and input too. The ranking, everybody. We would not have a good product if it was not for the team. So go team. Senator Estes, this one's for you, bud.
You've heard the motion. The motion will be held for final action. We are now ready for final action. On this roll call, we will take the following: the motion to concur on SB 13 and the appointments on page 5, Marks and Powell, and the bill on page 6, SB 50. Clerk will read the titles and the names.
SB 13, an act concerning property taxation. State Board of Tax Appeals member, Robin Marks, Virginia Powell. SB 50, an act concerning taxation.
Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgartner. Billinger. Bowers. Clays. Corson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Peg. Salcedo. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Pyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Senator from Finney, Senator Dole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. President, or however, sir. I'd like to give an explanation of vote if I could.
Please proceed.
There's a song out there that says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. The good senator from Montgomery has his on alcohol. Mine is on local control. On Senate Bill 13, I think that I appreciate the senator from Lynn and all the work that she did. There's a lot of things I like about Senate Bill 13, especially getting rid of the tax lid. But I still think it's a slap in the face of local control. And so that's why, consequently, I voted no on Senate Bill 13. Thank you.
Wish you have your remarks spread on the journal?
No, I'd have to write it out. I don't want to.
Very good. Further changes of vote? Any further explanations or changes? Senator from Miami, Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did vote pass on Virginia Powell. in that nomination. And I think it's important to acknowledge that while she did have her CPA, which was part of the requirement for that position in BODA, she does not have any of the appraisal background. Will need to take months worth of courses, and we know that that represents 70% of the hearings that they have. And my concern is that we found in the confirmation process that there's no requirement to pass any of the testing for the appraisal courses that she must take. And I did share with the committee, and I want to share with the body, as a former teacher, to have a test and have no requirement that a student must pass is a perfunctory process. And so we will be addressing that in future legislation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further questions or further explanations? Are there any further changes? Seeing none, the clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. "30 having voted in favor and 5 against SB 13, 35 having voted in favor and 3 against SB 50, 35 having voted in favor and none against the appointment of Virginia Powell. These measures and appointments, having received a constitutional majority, are hereby declared passed. 11 having voted in favor and 27 against the appointment of Robert Marks. This measure, having failed to receive the constitutional majority, is hereby declared not confirmed. Introduction to bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 290 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. Senate Bill 291 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning labor and employment. Senate Bill 295 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections. Senate Bill 293 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections. Senate Bill 294 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning firearms. Senate Bill 295 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning health and health care.
This constitutes the introduction of SB 290 through SB 295. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Mr. President, your Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance begs leave to submit the following report. The following appointment was referred to and considered by the committee, and your committee reports without recommendation to the Senate such appointment by the governor, members, CAPER's Board of Trustees, Kathleen Von Aken, to fill a term expiring on January 15th, 2025. Senator Longbine, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance recommends HB 2063 as amended by House Committee be passed, and then because the committee is the opinion that the bill is of a non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar. Senator Longbine, chairperson.
Are there announcements? Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Joint Conference Committee on Judiciary on SB 40 will not be meeting this afternoon. The hour is late to start that conference committee or take it up again. But we will reconvene the conference committee tomorrow morning, Friday, March 12th at 8:30 a.m. And I'm thinking it will be in the same room, 159 South. And again, we'll be discussing Kansas Emergency Management Act. Thank you.
Senator from Cowley, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fed and State will meet tomorrow at 10:30 for review of 2 bills, and also we'll be meeting on Monday.
Senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate FI and I will not meet tomorrow, and we will not meet on Monday. Please look for a calendar revision that should be in your inbox shortly.
Senator from Sherman, Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Ways and Means will not meet tomorrow, but we will meet on Monday. Thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ag and Natural Resources will meet tomorrow. We have final action on eggs, and we have a hearing too, so meeting tomorrow.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President. I neglected to announce that Senate Judiciary Committee will be meeting tomorrow at 10:30 in our regular room, 346 South. We will be hearing a concurrent resolution, and we will be working bills if we have a quorum tomorrow. If not, in any event, we will meet Monday as well at our regular time and place, and hearing bill as well as final action on bills previously heard. So make sure you're there. Thank you.
Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. President. Public Health and Welfare Committee will not have a meeting tomorrow, but we will have one Monday and a possible hearing on Senate Bill 295.
Chair has an announcement you reminded me of. He received an email from President Masterson soliciting you to like invest in something. That was a scam, if any of you got it. I did not send anybody an email asking for you to contribute to anything or give me any routing numbers or anything. So if you get it, scam. Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Transportation will be meeting Monday for a presentation. We will not be taking final action on any bills on Monday.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Tax Committee will have the schedule that's listed, except we will be adding Friday to the schedule for Senate Bill 286. So we will be meeting next Friday, Senate Bill 286.
Any further announcements? Oh, boy, you faded into the woodwork, don't I? Senator Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Commerce will meet on Monday. We're going to start on the House unemployment bill and going to try to go through all the amendments they put on. Next week will be the unemployment bill week from start to finish. We're going to start the hearing on Monday and work through the week, every day this week, trying to get that bill done and out to the floor. So
I apologize if I let you hang in for a little bit. Seeing no further announcements, Senator from Sedgwick, Majority Leader Solentrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate adjourn pro forma until 2:30 on Friday, March 12th, 2021.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate's adjourned.